Captain America: Brave New World is directed by Julius Onah and stars Anthony Mackie, Harrison Ford, and among others. And this is the 35th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In this story, it deals with Sam Wilson, who is now the current Captain America, and is having to solve this type of assassination attempt that happens to Thunderbolt Ross, who is now the elected president in the film. And it gets into some other stuff that becomes more of a sequel to The Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton, as it deals with some plot points from that, and then also dealing with plot points that took place at the end of Eternals, and also basically continuing the events of Captain America, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this is now the 35th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and as of lately, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been really hit and miss with me. There's some really great ones I've really enjoyed for the last few years. Most recently with Deadpool and Wolverine and Spider-Man No Way Home, and I've enjoyed some other ones too that have come out, like Shang-Chi and some others. But it just feels like for every good ones that there's been some really ones I just didn't really care too much for, or they went into movies that I have to really catch up with, or they went into movies that I just didn't really care all that much for, like the third Ant-Man movie, the Marvels, and so on. So it's been hit and miss depending on how you see the Marvel Cinematic Universe now ever since Endgame. And with this now being the fourth Captain America movie, it got me. I was still keeping it open-minded because I still really enjoyed the other three Captain America movies a lot. In fact, I think those actually make a great trilogy of their own in their own right, as they were consistently great from the first all the way to the third. And it feels to me like that was a very perfect trilogy as it was. And I feel like, at this point with them going into the future, I was open to see what they do with Sam Wilson, since he got when he was taking the mantle at the end of Avengers Endgame. And I finally did get a chance to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and while I didn't really find it great, I still thought it was at least decent. I just think that there's a lot of things in that show that really could have picked up better, especially with the pacing and a lot of other stuff. But I still didn't mind it so much. It just feels like, it was just more of basically a gap between the movie, the end of Endgame and this one. And just showing the lead up to Sam Wilson taking over as Captain America. And so going to this one, I just kind of had open-minded, because one of the things I also got curious about was seeing them have it to where Ross is pretty much becoming Red Hulk. And I know they probably would have kept that under wraps in the movie and stuff, and that probably would have been a great twist how it turns out and everything. But in the trailers, they pretty much had to let it go that he becomes the Red Hulk in this. And it almost really seemed like this was the kind of film that was really going through a lot of production trouble the most lately, because from what I heard, this movie was supposed to come out last year, but then they had to delay it for a whole year to do a lot of reshoots and stuff. And there's really been debates from what I've seen of how much they really did, and from what I heard, and also just debate on what the budget was and stuff. But going into it, it just really seems like behind the scenes, every time that I hear stuff that happens like that, it really kind of makes you wonder if that's for the better or worse. Because from what I've seen in certain movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially from examples of Ant-Man 3, and from what I also heard with some other films that they've done reshoots on, is that they don't always turn out either for the best, because they show that sometimes they don't always work out too well. And upon seeing the film, I can say that, yeah, I gotta admit that this is going to be probably another one of those kind of forgettable type of films for me, where it's got likable stuff in there somewhere, and there's good ideas that I see what they were really going for, but it misses a mark on a lot of things that I really feel like holds the movie back, and really could have done a whole lot better given what it is, especially coming out for the other three films. And I knew going into this film this wasn't going to be, as great as the other three, but this is also an example, I feel like, of a film that really should have done a whole lot more. And had they probably would have not gone on with all the reshoots and stuff, and maybe had probably a more cohesive narrative of what they were playing out with, I think that it really would have done it for the better. But to get my pros out of the way, I thought that the cast in this, for the most part, are great. I really enjoyed Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson. I've always enjoyed him in the franchise, and he's really kept it up with the series for a while. And I enjoyed the way that it plays out with his character in this. With his dynamic that goes on between him and Ross, and then also the dynamic between him and Isaiah Bradley. I thought that was a nice, good chemistry they had, just like they had in the show of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And he really holds his ground. His best, his performance is just really top notch, and I am open to see more of of what he does in the future with this character, like as the new Captain America. And then the same thing goes for Harrison Ford. Like, he's definitely one that really steals a lot of scenes in this, because not only was he really, fun to watch at points, but also the deep layers they give him, especially with him trying to deal with because it connects more with the Incredible Hulk in this, where you bring back Liv Tyler's Betty Ross, that he's pretty much been estranged for a while, and then you're also, and this is not a spoiler, but I mean, you're also bringing in other stuff that was referenced in the Incredible Hulk that they bring into, but it just really feels like, and I'll get to my cons this later, that they have all the ingredients to pretty much make a sequel to the Incredible Hulk, but not using actual Hulk himself, if that makes sense, But still, Harrison Ford is just always great as usual, and I've always, liked this. Every time I get to see him on the big screen, it's just always great to see him all the time, and he really makes it really work. And then also the scenes where he's actually turns into Red Hulk was not only really fun to watch, and a lot of the action really comes in agreement with that. Especially the way that he has the big fight that takes place with him and Captain America was really fun. But he knocks it out of the park. But he really did tremendous. And then it was also good to see some other characters that come back into this, especially I forgot the actor's name that plays Isaiah, but he was really great as well. I remember him also being really great in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then also he played in Dr. Sleep as well. I'm really starting to really enjoy that guy and seeing him in a lot of other stuff. And so he was great. And then the action scenes, for the most part, are very competent. They are definitely what you expect from a lot of more street-level type of hand-to-hand fights that you see where, Sam is, doing on his own. Because he doesn't have the super serum, so he's having to rely a lot on his wits and having to just use strategic stuff with it when it comes to using his wings and everything. And then also, having to fly around and then using the shield a lot. So he's having to use more of thinking to outsmart his enemies and stuff, and that I will get into a con with that, because I do also question the vulnerability later on in the film. But for the most part, when he's dealing with like the regular bad guys and stuff, the action scenes are really fun to watch when he's handling those parts. And you do see a lot of where there's points where he does get the damage, like you see with our main characters going through on that regard. But that was great. And then also, I do appreciate that the plot was going into this kind of political thriller part. That was giving me vibes of the Winter Soldier, but not quite the extent in this, because for about the first half, they take that approach. But then it dives into stuff that's a lot more messier as the movie goes along. And so this is now where I fall into my cons. And I will have to say that, unfortunately, what holds the movie back the most is that this is definitely a messy type of film. It gets into it to where you're not only dealing with the stuff that's involving with the mastermind that's behind everything, who's doing all the pulling the strings and stuff, but also you're dealing with characters that come in here that honestly really have no purpose. Like Giancarlo Esposito's character that comes in as one of the other soldiers, I really feel like you could have had a different actor altogether and not really change much, because his character in this film really serves no purpose, and he could have just been a regular soldier altogether. And I really think that was probably brought in for him, and from what I read, I think that he was brought in to do reshoots. I think that was probably one of the reshoots they did with that, because it really feels like his scenes really stick out a lot. And there's also other points where characters seems like they're talking to each other, like where you see our big villain coming face to face with Sam Wilson. It almost feels like these were reshoots done, because there's parts where it's in the green screens that take place, and the CGI can be pretty bad at points. And this has been an ongoing problem with the MCU for a while. And there's parts that really work, especially how Red Hulk looks and stuff, and some of the other action scenes that we get later on in the film. But there are points where you're seeing that characters are clearly on green screens, like flying around and stuff, like when we get to the climax, things like that. And it just really, it just goes to show, like, man, why are they, I don't know if that was just part of the reshoots, or if that was just, the actual problem with the CGI itself, because that has been an ongoing problem with a lot. That's been an issue for a long time now. And then on top of that, it also felt like there were some other characters I didn't really care too much for. Like, I wasn't really into Danny Ramirez in this. I felt like the replacement for Falcon, I thought, was kind of annoying at points. And it also did kind of feel like, I didn't really buy too much of the chemistry with him and Sam Wilson. I felt like it was just very off in a lot of parts. And the same thing goes for the girl that plays the new, I guess, the girl that is a former Black Widow in this. That's the security advisor for Ross. I felt like she just really, was kind of wooden at points, and she came across as kind of trying too hard, and I didn't really, care too much the way it plays on with they just felt like she was a tacked on character just to kind of have like an equivalent, like just to kind of like have more support in the film. And it's just like, I didn't really care. I just didn't really I didn't really feel much for her character. I didn't really care too much for her because she comes across as just kind of just being a low rent knockoff of one of the other, like either of Yelena or Natasha. You know, it just really seems like, you know, she's very low rent kind of Dollar Tree version of it. You know. And then on top of that, I just also felt like if the movie would have took with a more kind of serious political tone, like thriller tone, it would have really punched. It really would have made the vibes a lot more higher at stake, because this movie goes by pretty fast. And while I appreciate the movie at least being at least 2 hours and everything, it does feel like they're rushing plot points as it goes along later on. And then when we get to the climax, it almost feels like, okay, we see what they were going for here, but it also makes it seem like the movie could have also had some better payoff the way it played out, and also stuff to really, you know, flesh out things here and there, because when you're trying to cram so much of this, it was giving me this movie honestly kind of gives me flashbacks to how the theatrical version of Batman vs Superman did, where you're dealing with, well, and also on that one too, you're having characters that come together and fight, and then you got other plot points that are basically scattered around and stitched together. And that goes to show this is definitely one of those movies that you can tell that it was having trouble behind the scenes. And then on top of that, it feels like, you know, there's some points that the vulnerability I also question too, because when we get to the big fight that takes place between Red Hulk and Captain America, it is a fun fight, but I did also kind of question the way that Sam Wilson was able to take certain damage in certain points from the way that he's getting hit in areas from Red Hulk, because it almost feels like he could easily be killed in certain points like that. You know, it feels like this is one that they really could have. You know, I did kind of really question the longevity behind that. I know that in the movie he has like this certain armor that he wears that's also from, I think it's vibranium from Wakanda, I believe. But it also, even with that being said, there's some of the damage that he takes. I did also kind of wonder how he would survive that, you know. But and then there's that. And then there's also some other stuff that I feel like they didn't really. It also really seems like it was a missed opportunity to bring in at least Hulk in this, because without Bruce Banner around, it almost seems like all this stuff that's happening could have been a really relative plot point in a kind of a standalone Hulk film, if you know what I mean. And I know why they couldn't bring, you know, Hulk in for their reasons for the plot and among other things, you know, because this is the story they wanted to deal with. But it just makes me really wonder like what they were really trying to do with this, you know, because it feels more like a sequel to the Incredible Hulk than it does Captain America. And so, with that being said, though, I mean, movie wasn't bad, and it certainly should have been a lot better. And it's definitely one that I did kind of, you know, it is what I expected. And so with that, I'm going to give it just a low average Joe on the Film Freaks meter. So, for those of you who have also seen Captain America: Brave New World and the other films in the MCU, let me know in the comments of what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.